Hello, my friends, and welcome to Rick Reads. Today we'll be continuing The Demon with Chapter 17. Crossbow bolts and arrows whistled through the air, streaking through the area Dante had just been. 10 soldiers fell to the ground dead. Just before the fletching had cleared the weapon's edges, Dante crouched low to the ground, nearly going prone. He had memorized where each soldier stood and shifted himself into a position to force each sharpshooter to unwittingly line up with each other. He knew that each arrow or bolt would find its way to the heart of whichever soldier was unlucky enough to be directly across from the man who fired it. As soon as the air was clear, Dante sprang into action, lunging for the leader. His sword tip was at the man's throat before the dead men hit the street. "Face me yourself, and no more men will die this day," Dante growled. The big man visibly shook, but held his composure. He nodded, knowing that he was a dead man. Dante grinned, revealing needle-like teeth in the place of the regular ones he had had just but a moment before. Good choice. He stepped back, allowing the big man to step into the circle of soldiers. "Terms?" he asked. Dante shrugged. "You win, I leave. I win, you leave me the fuck alone." His calm tone did little to hide the burning fires in his eyes. The big man nodded, unsure of how he would explain this to Victor if he survived. Victor had expressly forbidden any of the soldiers to face the demon alone, but he did so in order to spare as many lives as he could. He knew his men would honor the agreement as well. Sighing, he readied himself for the coming fight. Dante took a stance, different from the first. This time he stood with his feet in the same position as before, but held his sword in both hands in front of him, mimicking the ancient samurai of feudal Japan. The straight, double-edged blade was not suited for such a fighting style. However, Dante's obvious comfort with the stance spoke of the decades of practice he had had with it. The sergeant began to sweat. A bead of sweat rolled down the side of his face and off of his chin. Before the droplet had reached the ground, Dante struck. The big man barely felt anything, had barely even perceived the demon move, but suddenly, Dante had his back to him. What was more disconcerting was the blood dripping from the demon's blade. Then the pain came. Burning fire seemed to burst through the big man's body, starting at his right hip and flowing upward to his left shoulder, just above his arm. The last sensation he felt before his upper half began to slide downward was the bursting of his own heart. The two halves of the big man fell to the street with a sickening wet plop, and blood and entrails spilled all over the ground. Several of the soldiers, so unused to such carnage, vomited. Even Erin could not hold her stomach and retched in the street. The few townsfolk who had the courage to stay and watch screamed and ran off. Dante lifted his sword to his face and licked the blood off the blade. The big man's fear-induced adrenaline had given the blood an especially coppery taste. As the warm fluid ran down his throat, Dante realized what he had done. He looked around at the carnage and ran his free hand through his hair. He looked at the soldiers and shook his head. "Inform their families that they died honorably in battle," Dante commanded. "Tell them these men died in defense of their home, and that their sacrifice was not in vain. Tell them the town is safe, and that no harm shall come to those who do not seek it." The promise was clear. Most of the men, those who were not too shocked and afraid, nodded in agreement. Victor was right. This demon did have a sense of honor. "All of you shall honor the agreed-upon terms as well," Dante added. "You leave me alone, and I promise you that I will leave the citizens of this town in peace." He looked at Erin, who regarded him with terror in her eyes, and nodded toward the tavern. She nodded and cautiously followed him. "He did what?" Victor hissed. His anger seethed within him and threatened to burst out. The militiaman fidgeted nervously with his helmet in his hands. He killed Sergeant Moreau, sir. Killed him in single combat after causing our bowmen to kill each other." His words sounded damning in his own ears, but he was the highest-ranking member of the militia now, so it fell to him to give the full report. "He ordered us to to tell the deceased men's families that they died honorably in combat in defense of the town, and that the town remains safe due to our actions. Victor was flummoxed. How was it possible that this demon would allow this town to remain unharmed? Dante was responsible for hundreds of cities burning to the ground. He was the one responsible for millions of deaths. He's lying, then, Victor surmised. He's trying to lull us all into a sense of false security before he strikes. He turned away from the soldier and looked pensively toward the scrying bowl, cursing himself for not thinking that he was simply sending his men to die. The soldier opened his mouth to say something, but closed it. He sighed and decided to speak anyway. With respect, sir, he began. Why leave defenders of the town alive if he means to kill us all anyway? Victor turned to look over his shoulder at the soldier, his anger abating somewhat. What better way to make us feel safe than to let the townspeople see they are still defended? He asked, offering some wisdom to the young man. I have tasked myself and the militia with keeping this town safe. It falls to me to think of every possible way this demon can destroy us. Go. Have your men return home for the night. They'll need some rest. Thank you, sir. The soldier bowed. He left the church and made for the barracks. Victor turned back to his scrying bowl and waved his hand over the water, conjuring an image of the school. Stacy was sitting at her desk, grading papers. She rested her chin on one slender hand while the other wrote small corrections on a paper. She blew a strand of hair away from her face and glanced at the clock on the wall. She shook her head and stood up, gathering her things. She slid the stack of papers in a bag and slung it over her shoulder. She walked out of the classroom and down the street on her way to the inn to go to her other job. Victor was glad to see her safe, knowing that the demon could have easily killed her as he had so many others. The angel worried for her safety. He knew of the evil things in the town, and they knew of him. They knew that if they laid a harmful finger on any of the townspeople, Victor would come down on them with righteous fury. Stacy walked down the street in complete safety, never knowing that her guardian angel was watching. Victor watched until she was in the bar and then dismissed the image, not wanting to invade her privacy as she changed into her gown. He respected her enough to not spy on her like that. He turned away from the bowl and sat at his desk. What was he going to do about Dante? The one person he dreaded coming to his small town had appeared out of nowhere. Was it a mistake to leave that message at the demon's home? Was Dante here to make him suffer? Or was he here to kill Stacy? In all of Victor's centuries-long life, he had never met a more caring, generous person than her, including the angels. She was the most precious person in Victor's life, and he was eternally grateful to call her friend. Victor's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Come in, he said, turning his chair to face the door. In walked a young man Victor had asked to tail the demon. Do you have news for me? Victor asked politely. The young man nodded timidly. Aye, sir, I do. The demon has purchased a room at the Ruby Rose Inn. I came as soon as he was settled in his room. Good work, young one, Victor commended. Go to the cellar here and take home some extra food for your family as payment. The young man smiled and bowed respectfully. I thank you, sir, but we have ample food. I ask that you distribute my reward to those less fortunate than I. Victor nodded, smiling at the man's generosity. I shall, he agreed. Though it will be hard to find a family in need, he added. The young man nodded. Aye, you do so well in keeping us all fed and healthy. Again, I thank you, sir. You are truly a boon to us poor folk. With that, he left the church and headed home. Despite the distressing thoughts of Dante's arrival, Victor smiled. It brought him joy to see the people he helped also extend some generosity toward their neighbors. When he had come to this town, the humans were destitute and starving. After a year of Victor's direct aid, the farmers had plenty of food to trade with the rest of the town, and crime and poverty became scarce indeed. It warmed Victor's heart to help those in need. Dante reclined in the comfortable chair in his room. This room was by far more inviting than the room Aaron purchased when they first arrived. Aaron sat in another chair across the room by the fireplace and made certain to avoid eye contact with the demon. Oh, what's wrong? Dante asked flippantly. Aaron huddled in her blanket, unwilling to answer. You know, Dante teased, if you want to continue to travel with me, you'll have to talk to me at some point. Erin shivered despite the warmth of the fire in her blanket and slowly shifted her eyes towards Dante. You, you're really a demon, aren't you? She stammered. Dante tilted his head in confusion. I thought you knew that already. Erin shook her head. Well, I never actually believed it, she whispered. Grandfather told me stories, but I never took them seriously. When he told me of you, I thought he meant another human. And when I met you, I thought you were simply that person's son. I was so desperate to see the world, I jumped at the chance to do so. I never believed you were actually a demon. She made sure to leave out the fact that she always thought of him as her hero, back when he was just a story that her grandfather told. Dante smiled. Well then, now you know we exist. My kind did in fact wipe out nearly all of humanity, but I was born near the end of the war, to a couple who fought alongside the angels. Hell, I've never even been to hell. I thought demons and angels were just stories, though. But you're really a demon. No human can move with that kind of speed. No human can muster the strength to cut a man in half as you did. No human can be as calm during battle as you were. It was like you became a different person entirely, as if you were always meant to be in combat. That was a real you, not this demon that I see before me. She shivered again and returned her wild gaze to the fire. At least there, in the flames, she could find some solace. Do not be afraid of me, little girl, Dante growled. The low timbre of his voice caused her to shakily glance back at him. I promised to keep you safe. Follow my instruction and you will survive. Allow your fear to control you. You will die. You will die bloody. Yes, I live for the peace I find in combat, but that is not who I am. I may be a demon, but I live as a human by my own choice. Erin mumbled something incomprehensible and turned back to the fire. Dante looked out the window and watched the sun's last rays disappear behind the horizon. Get some rest, Erin, he said. I'm going out. Stacy stepped onto the stage, as she had so many nights before, and let the music take her away. She let the music move her, swaying her hips in undulating wave-like motions. Her hands weaved through the air like a snake charmer's cobra. Her flowing auburn hair swayed with her motions, accenting every move and mirroring her crimson skirt. Her bare feet made not a sound as each step created another movement that allured the bar's many patrons. This was her release. This was her way of finding peace. After the myriad emotions she had felt over the events of the day, she needed to dance her worries away. Who was this mysterious man who came to her school? What was it about him that set her soul at ease? Was he truly a demon? She scarcely believed they existed. Also, how would Victor know what a demon was? Why was Victor so against Dante? As she danced, Stacy let her worries flow off of her shoulders like a soft rain. As the tempo of the music sped up, so too did her movements. She barely felt anything as she danced. Her muscles seemed to move with the music of their own accord. She closed her eyes against the swirling lights of the stage. When she opened them again, mid-swirl, she was facing the bar. There, seated at the bar with a bottle of Helgen's expensive Russian wine firmly gripped in his hand, was Dante. Their eyes met, and time stopped. All that mattered to Stacy was him. She knew that she would do anything for him. She had never believed in love before, especially after only knowing someone for such a short time. But she knew deep in her heart that this man was to be hers. She stared into his crimson eyes, lost in their swirling fires, knowing there was a creature of passion hidden beneath those beautiful orbs. But there was more than that. Stacy saw a great sadness there, coupled with such fiery wrath and a penchant for killing. She saw what she could only describe as a demonic essence hidden just beyond the ruby windows to his soul. Within that raging hellfire was a man so wrapped in tragedy and anger that his potential for the purest good was almost invisible. But she saw it. She saw every bit of good hidden deep within his eyes. Dante was floored. He had come to see Stacy dance again, but never expected this. As soon as her eyes found his world came to a halt. Entranced as he was simply by watching her dance, he was completely unprepared for those eyes. Her emerald eyes caught his and enthralled him. He would sacrifice everything he was for her, without her ever needing to ask. He knew without a shadow of a doubt that she was who he was meant to hold. She was all that mattered to him in this world. He stared into her beautiful green eyes and felt his very essence being stripped away. Every layer of anger, of sadness, of guilt, of unbridled fury was stripped from him, leaving him bare and defenseless for her. He was completely and utterly exposed to her scrutinizing gaze. He would hold nothing from her. If she asked for his most precious, deepest, darkest secret, it was hers. But then, two memories rose up in Dante's mind. The first was of a middle-aged woman with sandy blonde hair lying on her side in a burning building. He had tried to heal her, but she was too far gone. The second memory was of a young brown-haired woman. Her head lay next to her corpse, tears still wetting her cheeks. Her dead eyes still blazed with the damning question of why he would kill an innocent woman in cold blood. She did not understand. She never would. He could never tell her about that. It did not matter if she was reincarnated from those other lives. The simple fact was that Dante had killed her twice before. But he would sacrifice everything he was, his very soul if need be, to see her safe. No matter what happened, even if it meant his utter annihilation, he would be her protector, her savior, her knight. Eventually, after what seemed like hours, Stacy broke eye contact, resuming her dance and leaving Dante feeling weak in the knees. He was glad that he was sitting, for he knew without a doubt that he would have collapsed. He let out a long sigh and realized that he had been holding his breath the whole time. Shaking the cobwebs from his mind, he turned back to the bar and downed the rest of the bottle before realizing the vampire bartender was grinning from ear to ear. "As I said," the vampire chuckled, "I have never seen a man so completely struck by a woman." Dante smiled sheepishly and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. "Well, you know," was all he could manage. He resumed drinking, taking care not to get more than a slight buzz. After his fight in the street, he wanted to be ready for anything. Victor was likely behind the attack, and though Dante had let the other soldiers go, he felt that they may come back with a grudge. Dante sat at the bar for another hour, keeping an eye out for trouble and watching the stage for Stacy more often than he was willing to admit. Before long, the bar emptied of patrons as they left for the night. After another hour had passed, Dante was alone at the bar with the vampire. From what he could tell, even the other dining rooms in the inn were empty. Dante was just about to leave when the vampire raised his eyebrows at him. Without a word, he nodded to something behind the demon and scurried away, acting as if he had better things to do anywhere else. Confused, Dante decided to shrug it off. Then, a lithe form sat on the stool next to his. He glanced at the person and nearly dropped his glass. There sat Stacy, smiling at him. She wore a long, dark coat over her dress and smelled of a combination of perfume and light sweat. The scent was intoxication itself and left Dante's mind foggy. "Hey," she greeted. "Well, hello, beautiful," Dante smiled. The words slipped out before he could stop them and didn't even realize he had said them until Stacy began to blush. "I'm glad you came out tonight," Stacy said, trying to hide her blushing cheeks with her hair. "Well, you're quite the gifted dancer, I must say," Dante complimented. "I've never seen anyone as natural at it as you." Stacy blushed harder and couldn't contain a smile. "So, do you want to maybe get out of here?" Dante nodded, pulled a few gold coins from a pouch on his belt, and slid them onto the counter for the bartender. "Sure thing," he said, offering his arm for Stacy to take. She wrapped her arm in his, and they left the bar. Victor watched the whole thing, fists clenched in helpless fury. He had planned on following Dante and engaging him in battle outside the town. But when he summoned the demon's image into the bowl, he found him sitting in the bar watching Stacy dance. Victor knew he could not make a move on Dante with Stacy so near in fear of Dante taking her hostage and possibly killing her. He also did not want her anywhere near the fight with Dante, fearing she could be caught in the crossfire. The thought of Stacy hurt made Victor's heart heavy. He was unable to do anything until he knew Dante was alone. It seemed he would have to wait until Stacy went home and Dante went back to his own room in the inn before he could make his move. But watching the two of them so enamored with each other drew up even more complications. What if Dante truly could feel love, as angels or humans could? What if Stacy, against Victor's warning of Dante's true heritage, had actually fallen in love with him? As much as he hated Dante for his crimes in the past, Victor was grudgingly powerless to stop him. Stacy looked happier than Victor had ever seen her, and it seemed to be all because of this demon. Had Dante put a spell on her? Had he somehow coerced her into falling in love with him, just so he could get closer to Victor? What was going on? Victor paced in frustration, trying to figure out every angle Dante could be working. What if it was true love? How, in good conscience, could he tear them apart? How could Victor hurt Stacy like that? He couldn't. As much as he hated to admit it, it truly seemed like they were in love. There was no way, in heaven or on earth, that Victor could justify ripping apart what they had. That did not mean that he would not keep a very close eye on them, however. He would be watching them like a hawk, every minute detail, every tiny scrap of information to be had, Victor would see. As soon as Dante messed up, Victor would be there to swoop in and end the demon once and for all. And that was chapter 17 of The Demon. I hope you enjoyed it.